When I attended Sill's wedding, my name tag said housekeeper. Mill smirked. You're just a servant here. Worse. I had no meal. Sill giggled. Food is for real family. I stood up, took off my ring, and said, "Then I'm leaving." Mill turned pale. Wait. The wedding reception. The hall was dressed in gold and ivory. Chandeliers glistened. Violins played softly, and laughter echoed through the air. I stood near the entrance, my daughter's small hand in mine, trying to convince myself I belonged here. It was my sister-in-law's wedding. Family, at least by name. Yet, the moment I walked in, I noticed the glances, the whispers, and then came the name tag, housekeeper. The word was printed in sharp black letters, pinned to my chest by a smiling usher who avoided my eyes. I froze, the sound of laughter bubbling just a few feet away. My mother-in-law noticed immediately. She leaned back in her chair, her pearls gleaming against her pale neck, and smirked. "You're just a servant here," she said loudly enough for the nearest table to hear. "Don't look so surprised." The sting was sharp, but I clenched my fists, holding myself together. Moments later, my stomach growled, but no meal came. Plate after plate was served around me. The waiters skipped my seat deliberately, smirking as they passed. My sister-in-law caught my eye. She giggled, raising her champagne flute. "Food is for real family," she announced, her words dripping with cruelty. The guests roared with laughter. My wife said nothing. She looked away as if embarrassed, but not enough to defend me. That's when something inside me snapped. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the marble floor. The laughter quieted. Every eye turned toward me. I reached for my left hand, tugged off the ring that had bound me to this circus of humiliation, and placed it carefully on the table. "Then I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady. The room went still. My mother-in-law's smug smile vanished. Her face drained of color as she whispered, almost trembling, "Wait." The silence that spoke. The ballroom was silent, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner, the clink of a single spoon against porcelain, and the shallow breaths of 100 people holding back whispers. I turned to leave, sliding the ring across the polished wood, but that one word, "wait," still hung in the air like smoke. I stopped, looking back at my mother-in-law. Her face wasn't smug anymore. It was pale, eyes darting toward the head table where my father-in-law sat stiffly, gripping his wineglass so hard I thought it might shatter. "Why?" I asked evenly. "Why should I stay?" "So you can keep laughing. So I can play the role of servant while you dine like royalty." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her hands trembled on the armrest of her gilded chair. My sister-in-law smirked, mistaking her mother's hesitation for weakness. "Ignore him. He's pathetic. Always has been." But her voice wavered just slightly as she noticed her mother's stare. That was when it clicked. Her panic wasn't about me walking away. It was about what would follow if I walked away, because I knew something they thought I'd buried forever. I picked up the ring from the table, not to wear it, but to hold it between two fingers like a coin about to be tossed. "You think this is about me leaving? Number. This is about what I'll say once I'm gone." Gasps rippled across the room. My wife shifted uncomfortably, her smile cracking. My father-in-law's knuckles turned white. My mother-in-law pressed her lips into a thin line and finally whispered, almost begging this time, "Please sit down." The cracks in the facade. I didn't sit down. Instead, I leaned one hand on the table, the ring still glinting between my fingers, and let my gaze sweep across the family like a spotlight. "Interesting," I said quietly. "The one time I decide to leave, you all look terrified, almost as if you're afraid of what I might say once I'm out of your reach." Whispers broke out across the hall. Guests leaned toward each other, curiosity outweighing politeness. My wife shifted in her chair, her fingers twisting her napkin. "Stop making a scene," she hissed through gritted teeth. But her mother's voice betrayed desperation. "Please don't." That was when I smiled slowly, deliberately. "I wonder what these fine people would think," I continued, raising my voice just enough for the closest tables to hear. "If they knew how this family treats those it calls servants, or perhaps if they knew what happened to the missing trust fund last year." The color drained from my father-in-law's face. The whispering turned into a low roar of speculation. I didn't need to say more. Not yet. The suggestion was enough, like striking a match and holding it near dry wood. I turned the ring one last time between my fingers, then slipped it into my pocket instead of back on my hand. "You've made it very clear what I am to you. But you've forgotten one thing." I paused, letting the silence tighten like a noose. "I know exactly who you are, and so will everyone else very soon." Then I straightened my jacket and headed for the door, leaving their panic hanging heavy in the air. Behind me, my sister-in-law's nervous laugh cracked. My wife's fork clattered against her plate, and my mother-in-law whispered one word that everyone heard. "Not here." The first crack. I hadn't even made it halfway to the doors when the whispers turned into full-blown murmurs. Guests craned their necks, their phones discreetly recording as if the air itself smelled of scandal. Trust fund, someone repeated. Missing money, another whispered wide-eyed. My wife bolted up from her chair. He's lying, she snapped, her voice too shrill, too desperate. He's bitter. Ignore him. But damage control was already slipping through her fingers. A man in a navy suit, one of her father's business partners, leaned forward, his face flushed with anger. What does he mean by missing trust fund? We've been asking about those irregularities for months. My father-in-law tried to wave him down. Nonsense. Baseless slander. I stopped at the doorway and turned slowly, letting them all see the calmness in my face compared to their panic. Baseless, I said evenly. Funny, because I still have the receipts. Gasps rippled through the hall like shockwaves. Chimeras clicked. Every polite smile had transformed into suspicion. Every laugh into silence. My mother-in-law half rose, her hand trembling on the table. Sit down, she hissed at my wife, but her eyes betrayed it. Fear, not authority. I gave one last glance at the crowd. Enjoy your celebration, I said quietly. It's the last one you'll have without the world knowing the truth. Then I walked out, leaving the noise behind me. But I knew before the night was over, that noise would turn into chaos. Because once you hint at rot beneath a shiny surface, people don't stop digging. And I had just handed them the shovel. The fallout begins. By the time I reached the parking lot, the noise from inside had turned sharp, frantic. The celebratory hum was gone, replaced by angry voices. I leaned against my car, listening as the first wave of guests spilled outside. They weren't smiling anymore. They were whispering, their expressions tight, phones pressed to ears. She said the fund was just delayed. Delayed? My money was in that fund. Did you see his face when the son-in-law mentioned receipts? He knows something. My wife's uncle stormed past, muttering curses under his breath while another guest barked into his phone. Call the office. Freeze the transfers. Something's wrong inside. The tremors were already becoming an earthquake. Minutes later, I saw my wife's brother, the same one who'd mocked me at the reception table, burst out of the hall, his face pale, his tie askew. He stopped dead when he spotted me leaning casually against my car. What did you do? He demanded, his voice cracking. I tilted my head. I told the truth. People don't like being lied to, especially when their money's involved. His hands curled into fists, but before he could say anything more, another guest shoved past him, shouting back toward the hall. Call the auditors tonight. I slid into my car, rolled down the window, and looked straight at him. You laughed at me, I said softly. Tonight, I gave you a reason to cry. And trust me, this is just the beginning. As I drove away, the glow of the hall shrank in my rearview mirror, but I knew it wasn't the end of the night for them. It was the beginning of their unraveling because I hadn't even released the documents yet. And when I did, their perfect empire would collapse under the weight of their own lies. The public exposure. 2 days later, the final piece of my plan clicked into place. I had everything prepared. Scanned documents, financial trails, and voice recordings my wife's family had been too careless to hide. Offshore transfers, tax fraud, misappropriated investor money, all neatly packaged into a digital folder impossible to deny. At precisely 9 a.m., I pressed send. The file went out to every major news outlet, 3 watchdog agencies, and a handful of journalists who live for blood in the water. Within an hour, headlines started lighting up social media. Prominent family's business empire under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. Exclusive internal records show secret deals and hidden offshore accounts. The reaction was immediate. Clients began pulling contracts. Shareholders demanded emergency meetings. The company's stock plummeted by 32% in a single trading day. By lunchtime, their phones must have been exploding. I imagined them pacing in panic, watching their empire burn from the inside out. But the best part, I wasn't done yet. At 5 p.m., just as the evening news hit, I released the video of their private conversation, the one where they laughed about making me look unfit as a father and vowed to use my son as leverage. The backlash was nuclear. Investors weren't just angry, they were disgusted. Politicians who once shook their hands now issued public statements, distancing themselves. Even their closest friends started vanishing. And me? I was at home making dinner for my son, the TV on low in the background. He watched as their faces filled the screen, not as powerful hosts of glittering parties, but as suspects under federal investigation. He turned to me, eyes wide. Dad, did you do this? I smiled faintly and ruffled his hair. No, son. They did this to themselves. I just let the world see it. Ashes and arrests. The storm hit faster than even I expected. By midweek, subpoenas were flying out like confetti. The FBI raided their corporate offices. Laptops, files, even the framed Entrepreneur of the Year plaques were carried out in boxes. I heard from a friend in law enforcement that federal agents had also raided their luxury home, seizing hard drives and financial ledgers. Neighbors gathered outside, phones raised, recording the once untouchable family being escorted into black SUVs. But the most satisfying blow came from within their own ranks. Her brother, the one who had sneered at me during the wedding, flipped first. Faced with years in prison, he cut a deal and turned over even more evidence. Her parents, desperate to save themselves, followed soon after. And my ex-wife, she wasn't spared. She was named directly in the conspiracy, caught on video laughing about how she'd ruined me while casually discussing the offshore transfers. Suddenly, the same family that mocked me as worthless was pointing fingers at her. When the indictments were unsealed, their faces were splashed across every news broadcast. Wire fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy to defraud, child endangerment. Their empire didn't just collapse, it vaporized. But for me, the sweetest part wasn't the arrests. It was what came after. Her so-called friends stopped answering her calls. The charities she once chaired issued public statements, cutting ties. Even her new husband's family disowned her, scrubbing her from their websites and press releases. Meanwhile, I walked my son to school, holding his hand, the autumn air crisp and clean. Other parents nodded at me with respect. I wasn't the outcast anymore. That night, as I tucked him into bed, he whispered, "Dad, she can't hurt us anymore, right?" I brushed his hair back and smiled. "No, son. She's finished." And I meant it. The trial was over. Sentences handed down. My ex-wife would spend the next 11 years behind bars. Most men might have stopped there. I didn't because I knew her. When she eventually got out, she'd try to spin it, twist the narrative, and claw her way back into some corner of society. I couldn't allow her the luxury of rewriting history, so I used her own arrogance against her. Months before her sentencing, I had quietly gathered copies of every public speech, every charity gala toast, every article where she had bragged about being a model mother and self-made philanthropist. With the help of a journalist friend, we built a documentary, not a smear piece, but a meticulous fact-checked record. It began with her grand speeches, then cut to the FBI raids. It showed her laughing at the wedding when her family mocked me, then spliced in the footage of her plotting to use our son as leverage. The documentary aired online the week after her sentencing. It went viral overnight. She wasn't just a convicted felon. She became the cautionary tale. College courses cited her downfall. Parents used her as an example of greed gone too far. And the cherry on top, when parole hearings eventually come, her name will still be attached to that documentary. Her lies immortalized, her smirk replayed forever, her betrayal impossible to scrub away. Years later, my son and I stood on the balcony of our new home. He was older now, stronger, wiser, and he looked at me with pride. "Dad," he said softly, "you didn't just beat her. You made sure she can never hurt anyone else again." I smiled, feeling the weight of it all finally lift. "No, son. We did because some revenge ends in a courtroom. But the most epic revenge, it rewrites the legacy of the people who wronged you and ensures their story ends in shame." Epilogue. Full circle. It was years later when she finally tried to reach out. Her letters from prison had gone unanswered, her calls ignored. But now, just weeks before her scheduled release, she managed to corner me. Or at least she thought she did. I was leaving the courthouse after filing some last paperwork for my business expansion when she appeared. Thinner, worn down, but still carrying that same arrogance in her posture. "You ruined my life," she spat, her voice shaking. "You turned everyone against me. You made me a monster in the world's eyes." I looked at her calmly. "No," I said. "You did that all by yourself. I just held up the mirror." She tried to force a laugh, but it came out brittle, broken. Maybe our son will forgive me." At that exact moment, he walked up taller now, a young man with confidence in his stride. He glanced at her once, then turned his eyes to me. "Dad," he said evenly. "Ready to go?" She opened her mouth, desperate. "Please." But my son cut her off, his words sharp as glass. "You stopped being my mother the day you left me at Disney." Her face drained of color. She stumbled back as though the words themselves had struck her. We walked away together, father and son, side by side. And for the first time in years, I felt something stronger than victory. Peace. Because true revenge isn't just about destroying the one who betrayed you. It's about building a life so full, so strong, so unshakable that they realize they never had the power to break you in the first place. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Or should the storm have raged harder? Drop your verdict below. I read every single one. Hit like if you crave justice and share this story with someone who needs its fire. Follow and subscribe to Daily Scroll Stories because here betrayals don't sleep. They hunt their owners. Every shadow hides a reckoning. Every mask breaks and every betrayal is answered. Stay sharp. Stay unbroken. Stay tuned.